You.
With us now, retired Air Force Colonel and CNN military analyst Cedric Leighton, and former ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, is now the vice president for Russia and Europe at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Gentlemen, welcome. Mr. Ambassador, let me start with you. And the President Biden, he pointed out the contrast between the conversations we were having a year ago and what we're talking about today. How soon would Kyiv fall? How soon would that column of tanks that never went in or never moved, how soon would they go in? Would Germany offer more than helmets? Would they offer lethal support? Your thoughts on what we heard from President Biden today in Warsaw?
Yes, Victor, you're right. It's a big change from a year ago. The Ukrainian military has defeated the Russian military in Kyiv, and as you say, pushed them out of the capital. They were 20 minutes from downtown, so the Russians got close to the Ukrainian capital, and the Ukrainians pushed them back. They defeated them and pushed them out of Kharkiv. They defeated them and pushed them out of Kherson. A major counteroffensive that was very successful. Now the question is, after a year, can the Ukrainians get the supplies, get the equipment, get the weapons, get the ammunition that they need to break the Russian military? And that's what we're now talking about. Now, a year later, we're talking about how the Ukrainians might break the Russian military.
And the question is whether we can procure enough weapons, even if there is unanimity in whether to send them at this point. Colonel, to you, for the first time in many decades, there are no active arms control agreements between the United States and Russia. I'm curious, from your perspective, what was your reaction when you heard of that suspension from Vladimir Putin? And are you concerned perhaps of another arms race between the two countries?
Well, Bianna, I think we have to be very concerned about that prospect. So not only between Russia and the United States that there might be a new arms race, but we also have to think of the possibility of an arms race with China. China is not subject, has never been subject to any of the arms control regimes like SALT or START or any of the others. So it's maybe a way for Putin to kind of blend in with the Chinese idea of nuclear proliferation, and we could be seeing a very difficult period ahead from an arms control perspective. But I also have to say, Bianna, that I'm not surprised that this happened. I think it's pretty clear that Putin was on this path, and as Jill mentioned earlier, it's very clear that the Russians don't want to have anything to do with any arms control regime that might limit their options in Ukraine.
Ambassador, I've read again this morning that letter that you signed back in March of last year calling for the U.S., for NATO to create this no-fly zone over the humanitarian corridors, a term that now sounds quaint considering how much Russia has targeted civilians. And you also added this in that letter. This is in addition to the request from Ukrainian leaders for A-10 and MiG-29 aircraft to help Ukrainians defend themselves, which we also strongly support. That never happened for several reasons. But the request now is for F-16s. Should those be supplied to the Ukrainians? And if not, should the training start in case the U.S., in case NATO decides 6-8 months down the road to supply the fighter jets?
Victor, yes. My view is that we should provide the F-16s to the Ukrainians, probably not for this current battle. The breakthrough that I just described, that the Ukrainians are planning over the next couple of months, that's going to go with what they've got right now and what they're training on right now. The armor, the artillery, the infantry. That's the F-16s will be for a year from now. When, after the victory, as the Ukrainians say, after the victory, they will still be worried about another attack from the Russians. So we need to be sure that the Ukrainians both win in the short term, but also can defend themselves against another attack from the Russians after that victory. So yes, provide the F-16 and also start the training now.
So these asks could be a sort of backfill for later on down the line in this war. Colonel, given what we just talked about, potential nuclear threat that Russia and President Putin once again dangled by suspending the New START treaty, you have the Ukrainians continuing to ask not only for the F-16s, but also for long-range missiles, which until this point, the United States has said we will not be providing for fear of provocation or of landing inside of Russian territory, recognized Russian territory. Do you think this news from Vladimir Putin today on the suspension will impact whatever decision the U.S. may make on this point?
I think so, Bianna. I think it's very possible that we might see ATACMS or something similar to the ATACMS showing up in the Ukrainian arsenal. And what that really means is that we have a chance, the Ukrainians will have a chance to attack at a longer range Russian supply depots, Russian ammo dumps, things like that, that could make it very difficult for the Russians to proceed with any type of offensive operation against Ukraine.
Colonel, let me stick with you. And we've discussed over this last year the morale challenges of the Russian forces, the value, the utility of the disparity between what we saw and heard from President Biden and what we saw and heard from President Putin. Not only the content, but the context, the audience, the energy from what we heard and saw from these two leaders today. What's the value on the battlefield, if any, of what we saw today, Colonel?
Well, I think it's very interesting, when you combine in President Biden's case to Kyiv with his speech today in Warsaw, you see a definite energy, a definite willingness to work with people, a definite willingness to mention democratic values. And I think the mentioning of democratic values, the scene at the end where he met with President Biden, met with the children, all of that speaks to a much more humane approach to geopolitics. With Putin, you have this cold, antiseptic, very stringent approach to everything. And that is, I think, the clear contrast between the two. Biden, democratic values, going in to give peace and freedom a chance. Putin using obfuscation to describe a situation that really doesn't exist, but one that he wants to create. And I think that really makes a very big difference. And that contrast does have an impact directly on the front lines. It makes the Ukrainians much more willing to stand and fight. Not that they aren't already, they're doing a magnificent job in many cases, but this even solidifies that, and coupling what Biden has said with what President Zelensky has said, I think that makes a very big impact for the Ukrainian forces.
The venue showed a sharp contrast, too.
Yeah.
As that sort of solemn faces among the Russian officials who were listening to Vladimir Putin go through his greatest hits, and obviously a different, more enthusiastic crowd there in Warsaw listening to President Biden. All right, Colonel Cedric Leighton and Ambassador William Taylor, thank you.